wait, what? Max won't be opening after 5th of May? Oh no. Hi everyone, Iggy here. So I'd like to start off by affirming you guys for your creative submissions, and for those who drew, of course. And here are some that really caught my attention.
Wow!
Also, we did mention to draw, but some of your Google images, I wonder who they are. Oh well, enough of that. Let's move on to the lesson for today. So last week we left off by saying that we will be talking a little bit more about mission this week, and that's exactly what we're gonna do. But in order for us to do that, we have to zoom in to a particular part of the Bible, particular book of the Bible rather, and that is the Acts of the Apostles. So some of you may be wondering, wait, who are the apostles again? Well, the apostles are the original disciples of Jesus Christ, the OG, the 12 disciples, who then became the apostles. Now, the Acts of the Apostles would follow the apostles on their mission in the formation of the early church. So we recall last week we spoke about the Great Commission, where Jesus gave his disciples a very, very important mission. And that mission is to go and make disciples of all the nations. And that very mission will be known as evangelization. And we evangelize mainly through the gifts that have been given to us by God. Some of us can draw, as we can see from last week's submission. Some of us can sing. We can evangelize through song. Some of us are a little bit more knowledgeable and can evangelize through speaking truths of the Bible. Some of us may have stories to tell, and we can evangelize through our stories. And those are some ways we can evangelize to the world. But before we continue on that, let us recap what has happened in the timeline so far. So pause the video here and look at the slides, and I'll catch you in the next part. And welcome back. So to summarize a little bit of what you guys learned in the slide so far is a recap on the story. Jesus gave a mission to his disciples. Jesus also promised his disciples that they won't be alone in this mission. Pentecost came and the Holy Spirit descended upon them and empowered them. Now they gained a massive buff from God and they went out to preach. And so the amount of believers increased and they created communities from there. But now let us take a closer look into two particular apostles who will later be known as the fathers of the church, Peter and Paul. After Jesus ascended into heaven, these two would lead the disciples. They would take the charge and they lead the disciples as they continued to preach. And the apostle that I relate to the most out of the two would be Peter, Saint Peter, the first pope of the church. Also, do you guys remember that Peter was a fisherman before he became a disciple of Jesus? So Peter was someone whom Jesus loved a lot, and he's someone who Jesus reached out to a lot as well. However, Peter would be that same person who denied Jesus 3 times. No, he denied knowing Jesus 3 times before he was crucified, just as Jesus had prophesied. Now this showed that despite being the closest to God, Peter was still human. But here's the best part. He never stopped trying his best. And I think one standout moment for me in Peter's story would be one when he was nearing his end. As the apostles made it further and further, the amount of opposition grew as well. And this particular event took place as Peter was fleeing from Rome. He was escaping persecution and certain death. And as he was walking, he bumped into Jesus. And upon seeing him, he fell to his knees and asked, "Quo vadis," which is Latin for "where are you going?" In response to this, Jesus told Peter, "I am returning to Rome to be crucified again." Upon hearing these words, Peter understood why he would have saw Jesus there and then, and he went back to Rome to be persecuted, and he eventually passed on. For me, this story really spoke out to me because when I heard it, it felt like Jesus was directing the question at me instead. He was asking me, "Quo vadis?" And a little bit of context to this was that I took a small break from church as I was struggling a little bit with my faith. And upon returning to church and ministry, I felt really unworthy to be back in church. And in the back of my head, I will always ask myself this question, why would God call this sinner back and shower him with so many blessings and gifts? And it was in a particular camp that year where I served, where Jesus met me again. He showered me with blessings and gifts. And ever since after that camp, I struggled even more with unworthiness. And as I continued to struggle with these feelings of unworthiness, Jesus decided to meet me again. He decided to meet me outside of Rome. And that is through me hearing this story about Peter and Jesus from a friend. And when I heard this story, I felt that Jesus was pointing the question back at me, quo vadis. He was asking me, where are you going? Now that I've blessed you with numerous gifts, where are you going with these gifts? And much like Peter, Jesus was someone who has reached out to me a lot in my life, and I struggle to see him from time to time in my life. And although I can't say I'm very much like Peter, I can say that I relate to him a bit more in my interactions with Jesus. So now that you've gotten to know a little bit more about Peter and why I relate to him so much, let us take a closer look at Paul, the other apostle. So pause this video here and go back to the slides, and Josh will catch you later.
Good morning! I'm not sure if you guys can hear it, but there's tons of traffic outside, even though people should be at home because it's circuit breaker. So I'm gonna try and talk over the traffic. But anyway, St. Paul, one of my favorite writers and great saints that I look up to. Yeah, so you may or may not know this already, but fun fact, St. Paul started off as someone named Saul. So the story goes he was a Pharisee and he was born in Tarsus, which is, I guess in Singaporean context, he was born in like Orchard so he's like up there, man, he was super ups. Yeah, and because of the environment he was raised in, he grew up and began to persecute a lot of Christians. He would get them killed, get them thrown in jail, and I guess the most whack thing about this is he thought he was doing the right thing. Then one day, as he was on his high horse riding through town, they say Jesus appeared to him in a bright light and blinded him for 3 days. And he spoke to Saul, saying, "Saul, why do you persecute me?" So after this 3-day ordeal and some stuff in between, Paul's heart became converted, right? He began to love Jesus and he went out to preach the gospel to the very people he sought to destroy. He became the very thing he sought to destroy. But the irony is, after he got converted and he started to preach the gospel to people, a lot of his Jewish friends and like the people he grew up with rejected this, like his own people rejected him. So what he did instead was go out and preach the gospel to the Gentiles or the non-Jews. In the modern day context, I guess this would be our atheist or non-Christian friends. And he didn't just stop at preaching, he didn't stop at like traveling around places and telling people about the gospel, but he wrote a lot of books in the Bible. He wrote like 13 letters or something. Now I don't know math, but I mean, that's a pretty big number. And that's sort of a short summary of St. Paul's life. Yeah, so in that story alone, I think there's so much to look up to St. Paul for, right? For me, it boils down to 3 things: hope, humanity, and humility. So the first one is obviously hope. His whole story is a conversion story, but it's one of the greatest out there because, I mean, this guy was a straight up murderer. He was dead set on destroying Jesus and his followers. But he met Jesus along the way and became one of his followers. This doesn't just give me hope that God can make me good, because I mean, I'm a pretty ratchet person. Oh man. But it gives me hope that God can make anyone good. It's a story about a second chance, and that reminds me to give everyone else a second chance. Now, the second thing I love about St. Paul is his humanity. This is something I value so much because, I mean, he was a preacher to the Gentiles, right? The non-Jews. This means he didn't see people as Jews and non-Jews, chosen people and non-chosen people. He just saw them as people. He saw the intrinsic worth in every human being, and I think that's an important lesson for us even today, that everyone's got value. But beyond this, he went to connect with our humanity as well. He didn't preach the gospel in this inflated way. I don't know how many times we've heard sermons that just go like, you must love one another and love God. And I'm left thinking like, okay, but what is love? So St. Paul preached in a very relatable, simple and concrete way. In fact, he breaks down love in one of his writings. He didn't leave it as just love one another. He said this: love is patient, kind, it's not jealous, it's not pompous, it's not inflated, it's not rude, it doesn't seek its own interests, it's not quick-tempered, it does not brood over injury, it doesn't rejoice over wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things, and love never fails. And on top of breaking down these seemingly abstract concepts, he connected with people's struggles as well. He connected with people on the ground level. In Romans chapter 5, he tells us that, yeah, you're suffering. I feel that too, but it's okay, and here's why. So he says, not only that, but we even boast of our afflictions, knowing that an affliction produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope. And this hope does not disappoint, because the love of God has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit that has been given to us. So he recognized the value of like the human experience and the human suffering and what it means to be a person, right? The real things we go through. And this is all reflected in his writings. So do check them out if you have the time. So the third thing, and maybe the thing that resonates most with me about St. Paul, is his humility. And now I think we often overlook this, but when he was being converted into a follower of Christ, he had to give up his entire life. Like, he gave up his entire way of life. Now we need to remember that this guy's life mission for however long he had lived was to literally destroy Jesus and his followers. So to be able to become one of these people he sought to destroy, he had to be able to admit that he was wrong. And I think this is a difficult thing for many of us, right? Not just to be able to admit that we were wrong about one thing, but to be able to admit that we've been wrong about how we've been living life. And this trait of Paul particularly resonates with me because I grew up in a family where being right and getting our point across is sort of everything. In fact, I think in my past 20 years of life, I've only been apologized to by one of my family members, maybe 3 times. And this is sort of really commonplace for my family. Like when we're talking or we're having discussions where we're really quick to call each other out on what's wrong or right. And when we make our own mistakes, we don't really apologize. We sort of make up for it in different ways, right, through actions. And I bear no grudges because I know that they all do it with good intentions. They do it with the good of helping me do things better. But I think sometimes we just want to be loved and not told that we're wrong. Like St. Paul, because of the environment I was brought up in, I took on these values as well. And in the past, I've been really quick to point out other people's wrongdoings or tell them what's right. And you can ask Ignatius, who will tell you all about this. Man, we have been through so much together. But like St. Paul, this is why I resonate so much with him, because in our journeys of following Christ and following Jesus and learning to be like Jesus and learning to love, I had to learn that sometimes being right is not worth losing a relationship or friendship over. Sometimes doing things to the best standard is worthless if we're not able to do it with love. And St. Paul puts this very nicely in 1 Corinthians chapter 13. This is what he says: "If I speak in human and angelic tongues but do not have love, I'm a resounding gong or a clashing cymbal. And if I have the gift of prophecy and comprehend all mysteries and all knowledge, if I have all faith so as to move mountains but do not have love, I am nothing." If I don't have love, I am nothing. And I hold this Bible passage very close to my heart because it reminds me that 1, I need to love, if not it's worthless. But 2, that people 2,000 years ago were also struggling with the same thing I'm struggling with today. And struggling to give up what is righteous, to give up what is right for the sake of love. So these are just some of the reasons that I love St. Paul so much and look up to him. What are your reasons, right? Think about that for a while. But there is a final part of the slide, so do check that out and I will catch you in a bit. And we're back, so let's do a really quick TLDR of Acts of the Apostles. So we know we started with the Great Commission where Jesus was like, yeah, I'm gonna need you guys to preach, but hold on, wait till I send my Spirit. Then we have Pentecost where the Spirit came down. Suddenly everyone is fearless and began to preach in different tongues. Everyone understood them. The apostles went out to cast out demons, heal the sick and stuff like that. And eventually they formed the early church and brought the sacraments with them. And all of this would have been sort of impossible without the Holy Spirit. We will cover that in 3 weeks. Right, then we talked about St. Peter and St. Paul and how they were the early evangelists, but their missions did not stop with them. They trickled down all the way till today. And this same mission of Jesus to spread the gospel has been lived out by so many more people in this modern day. For example, we've got Saint Mother Teresa, she went out to clean the sick, to feed them, to feed the poor. We've got Saint John Paul II, he established so much while he was Pope. And we've even got modern day saints to be like Pope Francis, right? He's doing so much work for the church. And even you and I can preach the gospel, right? I love how Saint Francis puts it. He says, "Preach the gospel at all times, and if necessary, use words." And I think that's something for us to think about. By our lives, by the things we do we show that we love people? Do we show that God and His love exists. Maybe, maybe not, but that's okay because that's what the saints and apostles are for us to learn from, for us to learn how to love like Jesus. And that is your task for today. So I'm gonna run through it really quickly. You're gonna have to choose either between St. Peter or St. Paul and read up about them, go learn about them, go watch videos about them and what they did. And after that, on the Padlet, you're gonna have to submit either a writing, a drawing, a video, or just please not a captionless Google image. And answer 3 things. 1, what did this saint do that you think is pretty cool or important or just something that you vibe with, right? 2, what do you look up to the saint for? And 3, what do you want this saint to pray about for you? So just to be clear, you need to answer the 3 questions in your submission for attendance. Yeah, so that's pretty much all we have for this week. But otherwise, we are looking forward to your submissions and we will catch you soon.